as divisions deepen over the conflict in Ukraine. While the West appears to be trying to insert the matter of the Ukrainian conflict everywhere, most of the world is calling for its peaceful resolution. That's the words of the Russian foreign minister speaking at the G20 summit.
The answer is very simple. No one except the West and its closest satellites joined the anti-Russia sanctions. It is impossible not to touch on this topic because the West makes it a priority to throw the Ukrainian situation into any discussion. Third world countries are calling for a peaceful settlement through agreements. They know perfectly well that this process is hindered by Ukraine, which has legally banned negotiations with Russia.
We'll bring you more details on what Lavrov said later today. Meanwhile, no one dares to deprive Russia of its true rights. That's what Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi had to say on Western countries trying to prevent Moscow from taking part in international forums. This statement comes as Wang met with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, on the first day of the G20 summit.
We support Russia and its worthy role in the G20 summit. Russia has strong influence in various spheres of cooperation of the world community. No one multilateral negotiations. True right to participate in international multilateral negotiations.
Previously, the Indonesian president, the host of the summit, called on members to prevent another Cold War. In turn, the Indian Prime Minister warned against promoting any restrictions on energy supplies and called for ensuring stability in the market. This comes as the summit has already seen calls from Western members to isolate Russia. Nevertheless, Moscow's cooperation with developing G20 nations, including India and China, continues to grow. Archie's Maria Finoshina reports from Bali.
At its end, the main intrigue of this year's G20 is whether the members will at all be able to come to a compromise, to a consensus over the final declaration, as the group is torn apart unprecedentedly by enormous divisions within the group over how the German Chancellor pushed and called other nations for an isolation of Russia here at this summit, or rather more isolation, because that is what the West has been against Russia. But it didn't seem to be working, and even seems to have the opposite effect, as the economies of the United States and Western Europe are now projected to be declined, with a near 4-decade high inflation and rocketing prices for food and energy due to anti-Russia economic sanctions they, in fact, initiated, while India and China, that Russia logically strengthened ties and cooperation with after being pushed towards it to become the world's leading economies in the nearest future, and they seem to only increase trade with Russia. Some impressive figures for you in the first 8 months of this year. China's investment in Russia showed 150% increase compared to the last year, and Moscow and Beijing are planning to invest another $1.3 billion in joint projects. Russia-India bilateral trade, another 130% growth in September compared to last year, and all the supplier in October. After the meeting with the Russian foreign minister last Tuesday, his Indian counterpart said that buying oil from Russia would be to Delhi's huge interest and advantage.
It is our fundamental obligation to ensure that the Indian consumer has the best possible access on the most advantageous terms to international markets. And in that respect, quite honestly, we have seen that the India-Russia relationship has worked to advantage.
And other countries want to join BRICS. A bloc of leading developing countries continues expanding its political and, of course, financial influence, with Algeria, Argentina, and Iran now applying. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Afghanistan, and Turkey are very much interested, along with in here at the G20. If accepted, BRICS would become an entity with a GDP an entity with a GDP 30% larger than the currently looking for an scapegoat.